Rome eternal, divine, and damned. When the lost legion returns from beyond the Rhine, the empire's glory becomes its curse. The banners of the 13th Eagle rise again, soaked in the blood of the living and the silence of the dead. And from that night onward, the Tiber never ran clean again. The year was A.D. 96. The city of Rome gleamed like a god's reflection, marble towers glistening in the late sun, its streets pulsing with the fever of empire. Merchants shouted, priests burned incense to Jupiter, and senators whispered treachery behind gold-lined doors. Then came the sound, a low, distant thunder, boots marching, thousands of them, slow, measured, hollow. The first to hear it were the farmers beyond the city walls. They saw them first, too. Men, soldiers appearing from the forests of the north, emerging like ghosts from a fog that shouldn't exist in summer. Each carried the mark of Rome. Each bore the eagle of the 13th Legion. But the 13th had not returned from Germania. The 13th had vanished 10 years before. When word reached the Forum, chaos broke like thunder. Senators demanded answers. The emperor's messengers galloped through the marble gates, their faces white with disbelief. "The 13th has returned! Impossible! They were slaughtered beyond the Rhine!" Then what marches toward our gates? At twilight, the city watch climbed the northern tower. What they saw froze their blood. The legion marched perfect formation, silver armor glinting red in the dying sun. But there were no standards of color, no banners of triumph. Only a single eagle standard, blackened, dripping with something dark. Their faces were pale, their eyes blank, reflective, like obsidian mirrors. At the gate, the guards waited, spears trembling. The first of the soldiers approached. He was tall, his armor dented, his cloak torn by age. The centurion's voice cracked as he called out, "State your name, legion, and purpose in the city of Rome." The man did not answer. "Speak, who commands you?" Still silence. Then the wind shifted, carrying a scent, iron, decay, and something else. The man stepped closer. The guard saw his lips move slightly, whispering something ancient. Not Latin, not any tongue known to men. A shiver crawled through the watchmen. One guard raised his torch. The light flickered across the soldier's chest, revealing a deep, open wound, black and crawling, yet no blood flowed. Inside the Palatine Palace, Emperor Domitian stood before his court. His gold robes shimmered, but his hands would not stop trembling. "I saw it in a dream," he murmured to his advisor. "An eagle, wings spread, its beak dipped in blood. The omen returns." "My lord, omens fade," replied the advisor carefully. "Men do not rise from death." Domitian's gaze hardened. In Rome, even death obeys the emperor. He ordered the gates opened. He wanted to see what had returned. The massive gates groaned as they were drawn back. The crowd fell silent. Only the echo of armor remained that endless march. The 13th entered Rome. They moved through the archway without a word. Their steps struck the stone in perfect rhythm. Even the horses refused to neigh. At their front, their centurion, face obscured by a broken helm, carried the eagle standard blackened bronze, dripping crimson. When he stopped before the emperor, he raised the standard high. Domitian waited for the salute, the traditional cry of loyalty. "Ave, Caesar!" But none came. Only the whisper of wind and the faint, metallic creak of armor as heads turned toward the palace balcony in perfect, unnatural unison. That night, the emperor summoned the Senate to a feast of celebration. The air inside the palace felt heavy, as though the walls themselves had lungs. Wine was poured, gold plates glittered. Laughter, forced and thin, filled the air. But beneath, the music, the sound of dripping, slow, steady, rhythmic. A senator looked down at his plate. The wine inside his cup had turned black. He blinked, rubbed his eyes. It was red again. He said nothing. Another senator raised a toast. "To the 13th! To Rome, eternal!" The words echoed strangely, as if the marble itself repeated them. To Rome, eternal, eternal, eternal. Moments later, the first man choked. Then another, and another. One by one, senators convulsed, their veins darkening, their eyes rolling white. Their screams filled the palace. And still, the soldiers of the 13th stood outside, motionless. The emperor rose, trembling. "By the gods, what is this?" A servant stumbled forward. Blood poured from his ears as he fell, clutching his tray. The silver plates rang against the marble like tolling bells. Domitian turned to his captain. "Find their commander! Bring him before me!" But when they returned, they brought only a helm, hollow, cold, filled with ash. Outside, the torches along the street began to die, one after another. In the darkness, whispers filled the air. Ancient words, spoken like prayer and curse combined. The emperor's advisor knelt beside the dead senators, shaking. "My lord, these men, they are all marked." "Marked?" "Yes. Look on their chests. The same symbol, an eagle, carved into their flesh." Domitian's breath quickened. He turned toward the dark windows. And in the reflection of the glass, he saw not himself, but another face. A pale soldier's face, smiling faintly beneath a shattered helm. "The 13th has returned, but they bring no glory, only Rome's forgotten debt." As the night deepened, the wind carried a strange sound through the city. 1,000 voices whispering in unison. From every shadowed street, from every corner of the Tiber. Roma est mortua. Rome is dead. And the gates closed once more. Would you like me to continue with Episode 2, The Feast of Shadows, in the same cinematic narration format, 20-25 minutes, omniscient voice, dialogue-driven tension? It will open the story the following night when the curse of the 13th begins to spread through the heart of the empire. Rome fed on blood, gold, and silence. And on that night, it tasted itself. The city awoke to morning bells. The Senate House stood draped in black cloth. The air smelled of burnt incense and fear. Rumors whispered through every tavern and temple. Some said poison, others said divine punishment. But those who had seen the dead senators' faces knew better. Their lips had twisted into smiles. Smiles that should not belong to the dead. In the Palatine Palace, Emperor Domitian sat in silence. His eyes were fixed on the eagle standard that stood beside his throne, the same one the 13th had carried into the city. Its metal gleamed like oil, reflecting no light, absorbing it. "Has the camp been secured?" he asked. His captain bowed. "Yes, Caesar. The 13th's men remain outside the walls. They do not move. They do not eat. They stand, my lord. They simply stand. And the priests? They refuse to bless them." Domitian's hand tightened on the arm of his throne. "Then I will bless them myself." The captain hesitated. "With respect, Caesar, perhaps it is better to—" "Silence," Domitian hissed. "Rome fears nothing. Not the dead, not the gods, not shadows. Prepare another feast." The order echoed like a death sentence. That night, torches flickered across the marble steps as nobles, senators, and generals gathered once more, their laughter thin, their smiles carved. The halls glittered with jewels, but beneath every whisper, there was the same question no one dared speak aloud. Why had the 13th returned? As musicians plucked their lyres and dancers moved like smoke, the emperor rose, goblet in hand. "Citizens of Rome," he said, voice ringing through the hall, "our empire stands eternal. What we lost in the north, the gods have returned to us. Let us not question their mercy." The crowd murmured, uncertain. Domitian raised his cup. "To Rome! To Rome!" the crowd echoed. But as the chant faded, a chill passed through the air, a sudden drop, sharp as steel. The torches dimmed. The music faltered. And then, the door opened. The centurion of the 13th entered, the same one from the gate helm, shattered, armor stained. Behind him, a handful of soldiers stepped forward, moving with eerie precision. Domitian smiled, forcing courage into his voice. "Ah, our heroes return. Come, sit, and dine with your emperor." The centurion did not answer. He stopped before the table. The other soldiers halted behind him, motionless, their blank eyes fixed on the emperor. "You fought for Rome," Domitian continued, his tone softening. "You bled for her. Let your emperor honor you." A long silence. Then the centurion finally spoke. His voice was low, hoarse, broken like wind through tombs. "We did not return for honor." The words froze the hall. "Then for what?" Domitian demanded. "For remembrance," the emperor frowned. "Remembrance? Rome forgets its debts, but the earth does not." The torches flared suddenly, bursting with black smoke. Guests coughed, waving the fumes away, but the air grew heavier, thicker. Someone screamed. A senator's eyes rolled back. Another collapsed onto the floor, gasping for air. Their cup spilled, wine spreading like blood across the marble. Domitian shouted, "Guards, seize them!" But the soldiers who rushed forward never reached their targets. They fell, one by one, their armor clanging as they hit the ground. The centurion raised his hand. The eagle standard began to tremble. It dripped, not blood, something darker, tar-black, thick, alive. It fell onto the floor and spread, moving on its own, crawling like serpents of shadow. The guests screamed as the black tendrils coiled around their ankles. The torches extinguished. Darkness swallowed the hall. Then came the whispers, soft at first, like the sound of parchment tearing. Then louder. 1,000 voices speaking Latin backward, syllables bending and twisting like bones breaking under weight. Domitian staggered backward, clutching the eagle standard. "What are you?" he demanded. "What curse do you bring upon Rome?" The centurion's face lifted toward him, pale, streaked with ash. "You made us gods in death. Now we return to make you dust." He reached out, and the shadows moved. From the walls, faces emerged. Roman faces, senators, slaves, soldiers, all half-formed, melting from the stone like wax. The emperor screamed as the black mass surged toward him, swallowing the golden floor. The music had stopped. The dancers lay still. Only the whisper remained. Hours later, the doors burst open. Guards entered to find the feast hall empty. No bodies, no blood, only cold plates and overturned goblets. The eagle standard stood in the center of the room, upright, gleaming wet. The captain approached it cautiously, Then he saw what lay beneath the base, a single object, a mask carved from marble, bearing the emperor's face. By dawn, word spread through the city. The emperor had vanished. And at the gates, the 13th no longer stood in formation. They were gone. All that remained were their footprints pressed deep into the earth, each filled with black water that never reflected light. And in the silence that followed, the wind carried a single whisper through the alleys and temples. Rome feasts on its own shadow. Empires do not fall in battle. They fall in whispers, in the space between one breath and the next, when the gods remember what men tried to forget. The dawn after the feast was crossed, silent. No cries of vendors, no chariots rumbling on the cobblestones. Rome had stopped breathing. The people spoke in low voices. Eyes turned toward the palace on the hill, the Palatine, where the emperor had vanished into the night. No one saw him leave. No one saw him die. But every bird in Rome had fled by morning. In the Senate house, fear smelled stronger than incense. "He is dead," hissed one senator. "No taken. The 13th have stolen him." "Then call the Praetorians." "They will not come," whispered another. They guard empty corridors now. From the high window, the augur of the Senate stared into the gray horizon. "I told you," he murmured, voice trembling. "They were not men. The 13th are spirits. Rome fed them to the gods, and the gods spat them back." A silence followed. The old man turned, his eyes milky and fever bright. "The empire has opened the wrong door." That night, as the city slept in uneasy quiet, storm gathered over the Tiber. Thunder rolled like the march of 1,000 boots. And deep within the imperial palace, the emperor dreamed. Or perhaps something dreamed through him. He stood in a desert of ash. The sky was red not with sunset, but with blood that hung in clouds like smoke. And before him stood his army. 10,000 men of Rome, frozen in silence, faces gray, eyes hollow. In their center, the eagle's standard gleamed black as obsidian. A whisper came from nowhere, and everywhere. "Rome promised us eternity." The emperor tried to speak. "Who speaks?" "You did." A figure stepped forward from the ranks, the centurion of the 13th. His armor gleamed wet in the red light. Where his mouth should have been, there was only a deep wound, stitched shut by gold wire. Domitian staggered back. "This is a dream." The soldier raised a hand, and the world shuddered. The sky cracked open. From it fell feathers burning, black. An eagle, immense and skeletal, descended from the storm. Its eyes were two molten suns. Its claws sank into the ground, tearing through the emperor's shadow. "You crowned yourself a god," it hissed in 1,000 voices. "Now kneel before what gods truly are." Domitian screamed as its beak tore open his chest, but there was no blood, only ash. Only feathers. He fell to his knees, clutching at his heart, and awoke in his bed, gasping, drenched in sweat. He was alive, but something was wrong. The fire in his chamber burned blue. His reflection in the polished bronze mirror did not move when he did. He whispered, voice trembling, "By the gods, what have I done?" The reflection smiled back. Not with his face, with another's. The centurions. He called for his servants. None came. He called again, louder. "Lucius, Varro, attend your emperor." Silence. Then, faintly, from behind the curtains the sound of boots. Domitian turned slowly. The centurion, stood in the shadows of his chamber, helm cracked, armor black with soot. "You should not be here," Domitian whispered. "Yet here we are," the centurion answered. The emperor's hand trembled toward his sword. "You mock me? You mock Rome," the soldier said. "You feed her to the earth and expect the gods to stay silent?" Domitian shouted, "You are dead." The soldier stepped closer, and the air turned cold. "And you soon will be." The emperor drew his blade and swung, but the sword passed through empty air. The centurion was gone. Only the echo of boots remained, fading into the walls. At dawn, the emperor summoned the last of his trusted priests, the Flamindialus, the high servant of Jupiter. The old man entered, eyes sunken, robes heavy with the scent of burnt offerings. "You have angered the sky," the priest said. "The storm above the city has not moved since the feast. Then make it move." Domitian snapped. "Pray. Sacrifice! Do something!" The priest hesitated. "Sacrifice has already been made." Domitian froze. "What do you mean? Your feast was not a meal. It was an offering." And the gods accepted. Lightning split the heavens, the windows shattered. And outside the palace walls, in the darkness of the forum, figures began to gather. Not men, shadows. The shapes of soldiers, flickering in and out of sight, their armor whispering like chains dragged across marble. The priest fell to his knees. "They have come for the heart that was promised." "Whose heart?" Domitian demanded. "The heart of Rome!" The emperor backed away, voice breaking. "No! I am Rome!" The priest looked up, eyes glowing faintly in the blue light. Exactly. That night, Domitian's screams echoed through the palace. When the guards broke through the doors, they found only feathers scattered across the marble floor, black and smoldering. And on the emperor's throne sat the eagle standard of the 13th, glistening as though freshly bathed in blood. By morning, the city awoke again, this time to thunder that never stopped. The emperor was gone. The storm did not fade, and somewhere beyond the walls, unseen but felt, the 13th marched again, this time toward the heart of Rome itself. Dreams end when the dreamer wakes. But what happens when the dreamer is the world? Rome sent legions to conquer the earth, but when the earth answered, it sent them back. For 3 days, the Palatine stood empty, the throne room sealed, the storm unbroken, and in the streets, whispers grew like mold on marble. "The emperor is dead." "No, he hides beneath the temple. The 13th took him." By night, citizens swore they heard the sound of marching far off, beyond the Tiber, where the 13th had pitched their camp, marching that never approached, never faded, just continued. In the Senate, the Rome's oldest generals gathered in fear. Marcus Aelius Varro, commander of the Praetorian Guard, broke the silence. "We will go to the camp," he said. "See with our own eyes what stands there. And if what stands there is not of this world," asked Senator Cluvius. Varro's jaw tightened. "Then Rome will remind them what world they trespass upon." At dawn, Varro led 40 Praetorians across the northern road. The rain followed them thin and constant, whispering against their armor like breath. They passed the fields where the 13th had first appeared. There, the earth was black, not burned, not muddy, just black, like stone that had forgotten it was once soil. One of the soldiers murmured a prayer to Mars. Varro silenced him with a glare. "The gods have abandoned no one," he said. "We have simply forgotten their names." By midday, they reached the camp of the 13th. It stood exactly as the scouts had described. Rows of tents in perfect formation, banners rippling, armor glinting beneath the pale light. And yet, no movement, no sound. Varro raised his torch and entered. The first thing he noticed was the air still, stale, and wrong. The second was the smell, not decay, but dust, ancient and dry, as though time itself had died here. He drew back a tent flap. Inside were suits of armor, upright, positioned as though still worn, but there were no bodies inside, no bones, just armor, standing. Varro frowned. They left in order? A soldier knelt, touching the ground. The soil beneath was hard and warm. "No, sir. They didn't march. They sank." "Sank?" He gestured. The footprints around the camp were deep, as though the men had been pulled downward into the ground. They reached the center of the camp. There, the eagle standard of the 13th stood alone, planted in the earth. Its wings were outstretched, its bronze surface slick with rain. Varro approached. He noticed inscriptions carved along its base, not the usual Latin dedications to Jupiter, but something older, jagged, and almost serpentine in form. "Have this taken to the augurs," he ordered. "I want it translated by nightfall." But when one soldier reached out to touch it, his torch went out. Instantly, no wind, no movement, just darkness swallowing the light. A voice broke the silence. "Do you hear that?" whispered another guard. Varro froze. There was no sound, only the rain. Then, beneath it, the faintest rhythm, a heartbeat, slow, steady, massive. It came from the ground. The soldiers began to back away. One knelt again, placing his palm to the soil, and screamed. Varro grabbed his arm. The man's eyes were wide, his face white. "It's breathing," he gasped. "The ground is breathing." The soil pulsed gently, once, like the exhale of something vast. Then, from the tents, came a sound, the clatter of metal falling, one after another, like bones collapsing. The armor no longer stood. It lay scattered, empty. Varro shouted, "Form ranks!" But the rain had turned to mist. The air thickened. Shapes began to appear within it, faint outlines of soldiers, flickering like candlelight, their armor ghostly and translucent. They moved in formation, but their feet did not touch the ground. Varro stepped forward, torch raised. "In the name of Rome, identify yourselves." One of the figures turned its head. Its eyes glowed faintly beneath the shadow of its helm. "We are Rome," it whispered. Then the mist scattered, and the camp was empty again. The Praetorians fled back to the road. Only Varro lingered, staring at the eagle standard still planted in the ground. He felt drawn to it, a pull deep in his chest, like gravity reversed. He reached for it, trembling. For a moment, he saw himself reflected in its black surface. Then another reflection appeared beside a legionary's face, watching him. He stumbled back, dropping the torch. The light caught the base of the standard once more, and for a heartbeat, Varro saw that it was not planted in the soil at all. It was growing from it. That night, the survivors returned to the city. Only half of them spoke. The others sat silent, eyes unfocused, faces pale as wax. Varro went straight to the Senate. He burst through the doors, armor drenched in rain, voice hoarse. "The camp is not a camp," he said. "It's a tomb. A tomb, yes, and Rome built it. He threw the eagle's standard onto the floor. Its bronze surface cracked the marble. The senators flinched, and from within the crack, a single drop of dark water seeped upward. Varro stared, whispering, "The 13th didn't come back. Rome never let them leave." Outside, thunder rolled again. From the northern hills came the sound of marching slow, distant, endless. And over the rooftops, for the first time, the people saw it. A faint red glow, flickering in the mist beyond the walls. A campfire that never went out. The living built the empire. The dead will finish it. When the gods grow silent, men begin to speak in their place, and sometimes the gods listen. The day after Varro's return, the Senate met under a sky the color of iron. The storm had not moved in a week. Lightning flashed, but there was never thunder. Only the deep hum of rain on marble, as though the heavens were holding their breath. Inside the Curia Julia, the senators sat wrapped in their cloaks, faces gray with sleeplessness. The eagle standard stood in the center of the floor, veiled in cloth. No one wished to touch it again. "You saw the camp," said Senator Cluvius, voice brittle. "What did you find there?" Varro's eyes were hollow. Nothing alive, nothing dead, only Rome's reflection. A murmur moved through the chamber. Then, this is witchcraft, or treason, or both. At last, the oldest voice in the room spoke Aulus Fenestella, keeper of the Sibylline scrolls, his skin so pale it seemed made of parchment. "No, it is memory." The hall fell silent. "Explain yourself, old man," Varro demanded. Fenestella turned toward the veiled standard. "Do you think Rome conquered the world by strength alone? Every triumph was paid for, every victory bought. We offered gold, blood, and prayers, but the gods asked for something greater." "Speak plainly," Varro said. "The 13th, Fenestella whispered. "They were not lost in the north. They were given." He told them the story in fragments, as though each word carried weight enough to break him. 10 years before, when the 13th marched into Germania, the augurs had read the omens, an eclipse that lasted too long, a flock of crows flying backward, a fountain that ran dry. The signs promised ruin. Rome could not afford another defeat, so the priests made a covenant. They would offer a legion every man, every horse, every drop of blood to whatever lay beneath the earth. In exchange, the gods would grant victory to Rome for a generation. "And they did," Fenestella said, "until now." A senator crossed himself with trembling fingers. "You mean to say we sacrificed our own?" "No," Fenestella answered. "We sacrificed Rome itself through them. The 13th became the empire's shadow, and when the shadow grows longer than the man, it devours him." Varro leaned forward. "Why return now?" "Because debts age poorly, Commander, even in the underworld." Outside, the rain began to fall harder, the sound filling every pause. Varro rose. "Then how do we end this curse?" Fenestella's eyes lifted toward the oculus of the roof, where lightning flickered. "You cannot end what was sworn in the name of eternity, but you may contain it. How? By completing the offering. The Emperor is gone." "Not his empire," Fenestella murmured. "As long as Rome draws breath, the covenant remains open." A chill crept through the room. "You are saying Rome itself must die?" "I am saying Rome must remember what it is and kneel." When the session ended, no one spoke. The senators left in silence, each one glancing once toward the veiled standard before hurrying out into the rain. Only Varro stayed behind. He approached Fenestella, who now sat slumped against the wall, exhausted. "If this is true, old man, what are we to do?" Fenestella's lips moved in a whisper, barely audible. "Go to the catacombs beneath the Forum. There you will find the altar they built. Break it if you dare." "And if I do not?" The old man smiled faintly. "Then you will not need to. Rome will break itself." That night, Varro rode alone through the deserted streets. The temples were empty. The statues of the gods seemed to turn their faces away as he passed. At the temples of the Skad, mouth of the Forum, he dismounted. The rain had stopped. The air was heavy, expectant. He found the entrance to the ancient catacombs, a cracked stairway sealed by a fallen slab. He pushed it aside and descended. The torches hissed as he lit them. The walls were carved with names, thousands of them, soldiers of the 13th, etched in perfect order. He reached the bottom and found the altar. A single block of black stone, pulsing faintly, like the heart of a living thing. He raised his sword. For a moment, he hesitated, and in that breath, he heard it a whisper from behind him, low and familiar. "Commander." He turned. The passage was empty, but the torches flickered, and the carved names on the walls began to move, letters sliding, rearranging, forming new words. One phrase repeated over and over, "Remember US." Varro's sword clattered to the ground. He fell to his knees, breathing hard. Above him, the city groaned, a sound deep and metallic, as though the stones themselves were shifting in their sleep. He stumbled back toward the stairs, emerging just as dawn broke. The first light of morning touched the city, and for an instant, he thought he saw the skyline of Rome, ripple towers bending, walls breathing. The sun rose blood red, and in the distance, beyond the Tiber, the campfire of the 13th still burned. Some debts cannot be paid in gold or blood, only in memory, and memory never dies. An empire is not stone and sword, it is faith, and when faith cracks, even marble bleeds. At first, Rome pretended nothing had changed. The markets opened, the bakers lit their fires, the heralds cried the emperor's decrees. But beneath it all, something had shifted. The air carried a weight, like the breath before a storm that never came. Dogs barked at empty corners. Children woke screaming from dreams they could not describe. And each night, the sound of marching drifted faintly over the Tiber. On the 7th morning, a priest at the Temple of Jupiter found the statue crying, not water, not blood. A clear, amber fluid seeped from the eyes, thick, shimmering, and cold. When he touched it, the stone trembled. By noon, word had spread. Crowds gathered, kneeling before the temple steps. Some prayed, some fled, and others whispered that the king of the gods was weeping for Rome. "The gods mourn their city," an old woman said. "No," muttered another. "They mourn themselves." The augurs were summoned. They examined the fluid, the air, the birds. None returned with the same story. One claimed it was the dew of the underworld. Another said the statue's tears were the souls of soldiers long forgotten. A third, trembling, declared, "Jupiter weeps because he no longer remembers his own name." That night, lightning struck the temple. The roof did not burn it, blackened, cracked, and then sighed. Those who stood close swore they heard the thunder say a word. A single name, lost to language. Elsewhere, in the poorer quarters, other miracles began. Bread turned to ash when broken. Wine soured in the mouth, but smelled of honey. A blind beggar claimed he saw the city turn inside out for a heartbeat, and afterward he refused to open his eyes again. The Tiber swelled without rain, its surface crawling with bubbles that shimmered like molten gold. Fish floated dead, but their eyes glowed faintly, like coins under torchlight. People began to speak of the 13th shadow. They said it walked at night, helmeted, without a face. Where it passed, doors opened on their own. And if it found you staring, you would remember things you had never lived. In the Senate, panic ripened into argument. Some demanded sacrifices. Others proposed fleeing to the southern colonies. "We cannot abandon the city," shouted Varro. "Rome is the empire." "Then the empire is damned," Cluvius replied. Varro struck the marble with his fist. "No cursed, not damned. There is a difference. Tell that to the statues that bleed." The hall erupted into chaos. Through the noise, Fenistella's voice rose, thin but sharp. "Enough. The curse spreads because we name it. Rome lives through belief. Stop believing, and it will devour you." "You expect silence to save us?" Varro asked. "No," Fenestella said. "I expect reverence." That night, the eagle standard was moved to the Temple of Mars for protection. The priests sealed the doors and prayed until dawn. When they opened them again, the standard had wept. A dark stain streaked down from its wings, like tears of rust, and the floor beneath it was warm, pulsing faintly, as though the temple itself had a heartbeat. A boy acolyte fainted. When they woke him, he muttered a single phrase, over and over. "The eagle wants to fly home." In the slums, fires burned on rooftops. Citizens spoke of voices in the fountains, whispers that offered answers to questions no one had asked aloud. A midwife found a newborn child with a scar on its palm, shaped like a Roman numeral 13. When she tried to wash it, the mark would not fade. And above it all, the city began to hum. Not a sound of men or wind, but something deeper. A vibration in the stone. It came from below. The same catacombs Varro had visited now seemed to breathe with the rhythm of the marching he'd once heard in the fields. The 13th was coming closer, not as an army, but as a memory that refused burial. By the 10th night, the omens reached the Palatine. The emperor's chambers, sealed since his disappearance, were found open. Guards swore they had not touched the door. Inside, the room was undisturbed, save for one thing. On the throne, carved into the marble itself, was a fresh inscription, not chiseled, but seared, as though burned by invisible flame. Roma Recorda. Rome remembers. Varro stood before it in silence. His torch flickered, shadows stretching long and thin across the chamber walls. He whispered to himself, "If memory is our curse, then forgetting is our salvation." Behind him, the thunder rolled again, slow, deliberate, almost human. The dead do not envy the living, they envy those who forget. Fear is the oldest god. And tonight, Rome worshipped him. By dusk, the skies above the Forum were black, not from rain, but from wings. Crows circled endlessly, thousands of them, turning the light to ash. Their cries drowned out the sound of the bells, the market calls, even the prayers. People whispered that each bird carried a soul of the 13th upon its feathers, that they had returned to witness the city's undoing. In the temples, priests beat their chests and called for sacrifice. Every altar burned, every flame redder than blood. The city had begun to eat itself in the name of salvation. At the Temple of Mars, Varro stood before the weeping eagle. It pulsed, again, faintly, as though alive. The priests surrounded him, chanting the ancient words, their voices shaking. "Commander," one begged, "we must appease the Legion. Let us offer the traitors, the thieves, the impure." Varro turned, his armor dark with soot. "Appease them? They are Rome's sons, not demons." The priest trembled. "Then why do the gods cry?" "Because we made them." Outside, chaos spread through the streets. Fires climbed the marble walls, the smell of incense mixing with smoke and fear. The crowd had turned feral pilgrims, breaking idols, families fleeing their homes, soldiers drawing blades against shadows. A rumor cut through the city like a knife. The 13th had been seen marching from the north. Men dropped tools and took arms. Women fell to their knees. The sound came first, that same steady march, deep and distant, echoing through the stones. But when people turned toward the northern gates, there was nothing. Only crows, perched upon the walls like sentinels. In the Senate, torches sputtered. Fenestella lay dying in his chair, skin like wax, whispering prayers to no god in particular. Cluvius burst through the doors, cloak soaked, eyes wide. "They are tearing the temples apart. The people have gone mad." "Not mad," Fenestella rasped. "Awake? To what?" "To the truth. The gods are us. The 13th is us. Rome made its own ghosts." His eyes rolled back, and he began to laugh, a dry, papery sound that echoed through the chamber like the flutter of wings. When he finally fell silent, his lips were still curved in that brittle smile. Night fell, the Tiber overflowed. The statues along its banks leaned forward, stone necks cracking, as though to watch. In the streets, the people gathered in a frenzy around a single sight, a crow, black as pitch, perched upon a broken column, eating something that gleamed red under the torchlight. A child's toy, a small bronze soldier. The crowd took it as a sign. "A sacrifice," someone cried. "Rome must feed the dead." And the madness began. They dragged the bodies of criminals, the sick, the dying, to the steps of the temples. They built pyres in the squares, threw offerings of bread, wine, and gold into the flames. But the fire would not burn. It hissed like breath against skin. Above, the crows screamed louder. The sky churned, lightning flashing red and green. The people began to dance in the streets, wild, ecstatic, weeping, chanting the only words that came to them, Roma Recorda. Rome remembers. From his tower, Varro watched it unfold. Below him, the eternal city had become a storm of voices and smoke. The temples glowed like embers. The Tiber shimmered like a mirror of molten gold. And in that reflection, he saw them, the 13th Legion, standing in perfect ranks along the riverbank, their armor lit by invisible fire, silent, watching, waiting. Varro's throat closed. He whispered to himself, "They want to march again." He rode into the city square at dawn. The fires had gone out. Smoke hung low, thick as fog. Bodies lay in the streets, not slain, but still, as if sleeping. Each had the same faint smile. Each held their right hand over their heart, fingers curved in the shape of the eagle. The crows had gone. At the steps of the Temple of Mars, Varro dismounted. The eagle standard was gone. Only a single feather remained black, metallic, and warm to the touch. He looked up. Above the city, the storm clouds had parted, revealing a sky the color of bronze. And there, faint against the dawn, he thought he saw the outline of wings stretching across the heavens. Faith builds empires, but fear keeps them alive. When silence sits upon a throne, even whispers become treason. Morning crept over Rome like a fever dream. The smoke had thinned, the rain had stopped, but nothing smelled of life. The city was hushed, not peaceful, but expectant. Even the crows had gone quiet. In the forum, people moved softly, as if afraid to wake something sleeping. The pyres still smoked. The marble was black with soot, streaked like veins through flesh. No one spoke of the night before. They only said, "The emperor has returned." The news spread without a herald, without decree. It passed mouth to mouth, tone to tone, a whisper wearing the shape of hope. By noon, the Senate had convened in secret. No trumpets, no banners, only the echo of sandals across the floor. Varro stood before them, eyes hollowed by sleeplessness. He said nothing at first, letting the murmur fade. "You have all heard the rumor," he said finally, "and you want to believe it. You doubt it?" Cluvius asked. Varro's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "I have seen the emperor's chambers. The throne was empty 3 days ago. And now?" Varro hesitated. "Now, someone sits upon it." The senators exchanged glances. Fenestella was dead, the augurs fled or mad, and the city's priests had begun speaking in riddles. There was no one left to interpret miracles, so they chose to witness. At dusk, the Praetorians opened the gates of the Palatine. Torches lined the corridor. No servants, no music, just the heavy scent of burned incense, too sweet to bear. Varro led the procession 20 men, their steps synchronized, their faces pale. The marble floors gleamed with strange reflections, as if the torches burned underwater. At the throne room doors, the guards hesitated. Varro placed his hand upon the bronze, and the doors opened on their own. Inside, the air was still. Candles flickered, their light bending oddly, shadows cast in the wrong directions. The imperial throne stood at the far end, and upon it, a figure sat. He was dressed in imperial robes, his laurel crown blackened with age. His face was hidden by shadow, though the torches reached him. And, when he breathed, the sound was faint, dry, like the shifting of dust. "Ave, Caesar," Varro said quietly. The figure lifted his head. The senators knelt. The sound of their knees against marble echoed unnaturally long, as if the hall itself were hollow. Varro remained standing. His eyes narrowed. "My emperor, where have you been?" The figure smiled too slowly, too carefully. The lips moved, but no words came. Only a faint rasp like wind through a tomb. Then, from somewhere in the hall, another voice answered, soft, far away. "Here." Varro turned. The voice had come from behind the throne, from the shadows. He drew his sword. The senators gasped. The figure upon the throne did not move, only tilted its head, as if listening to the sound of steel. Varro took a step forward. Behind the throne, the shadows rippled, darker than black. And there he saw them. Footprints in the dust, bare, countless, marching in perfect formation around the base of the dais, disappearing into the walls. He whispered, 13th. The figure upon the throne spoke at last. The voice was the emperor's familiar, commanding, but distant, as if echoing from a cavern. "Rome endures." "Who are you?" Varro demanded. "Rome endures." "What are you?" The head turned toward him. Eyes opened. Not eyes at all, but two deep hollows filled with faint red light, pulsing like coals. Rome remembers. The senators began to weep. One by one, they pressed their foreheads to the floor, murmuring prayers. Varro stepped back, heart pounding. The emperor, or the thing wearing his likeness, rose. His robes did not move as cloth should. They shimmered, heavy as metal. The laurel leaves upon his crown flaked to dust. He stepped down from the dais. Each footfall sounded like the striking of a drum. Varro lifted his sword, but his hand would not steady. The air itself seemed to resist him. "You are not him," Varro whispered. "He was Rome," the figure said. "Now Rome is me. You're a shadow. All empires are shadows." The torches flickered. The senators began to chant the emperor's titles, louder and louder, their voices breaking, desperate. Each word seemed to strengthen the figure, make him more solid, more real. Varro tried to shout for silence, but his voice was swallowed by the sound. The figure turned toward the assembly. Its face, once the emperor, shifted, becoming many faces at once. Old, young, male, female, each flickering like candlelight, all whispering in unison, "Rome remembers." When it ended, the throne room was empty again. The senators lay unconscious. Varro stood alone, his sword blackened by ash. The throne was once more vacant, but carved into its surface, beneath the laurel crest, was a single new inscription: 13th Imperium, the 13th Rules. That night, Varro walked out into the streets. The city was quiet, again too quiet. No fires, no screams. Only the faint, rhythmic sound of marching from beneath the earth. He whispered to the dark, "Who rules Rome now?" And the answer came, soft as the rustle of wings: Rome itself. A throne is never empty. It merely waits for whoever remembers it most. Every city has two faces, the one built for the living and the one that remembers them. The night after the emperor returned, or what wore his face, Varro could not sleep. He sat by the torch in his quarters, armor half fastened, the feather from the eagle's standard lying before him on the table. It pulsed faintly, in rhythm with his heartbeat. Every time he looked away, it seemed closer. He rose before dawn. No guard saw him leave. He walked the streets in silence, the hem of his cloak brushing the ash that still clung to the stones. The city felt hollow. Every sound echoed too long. Every shadow lingered a little too near. He passed the forum, the temples, the broken pyres, and finally stopped before the same cracked stairway that led beneath. The catacombs waited. Varro lit his torch and descended. The air grew cold at once, not the chill of earth, but of memory. Moisture dripped in the dark. Each step carried him deeper into the breath of the city's bones. On the walls, the names still glimmered faintly in the torchlight, the soldiers of the 13th. Only now, he saw new marks between them. Small carvings, circles, crossed lines, strange sigils, not Latin, not Greek. They pulsed when the flame neared. "The dead writing their own prayers," he whispered. His voice returned to him, delayed a faint echo that did not quite match the words. It spoke a half-beat later, in a tone not quite his own. He froze. The torch trembled in his hand. The tunnel opened into a vast chamber, an ancient space, carved long before Rome wore its name. Columns rose like tree trunks, and between them stood statues. soldiers frozen mid-march, armor fused to stone. At the center of the chamber stood the altar. He had seen it before the black stone, breathing like a heart, but now it had changed. It was cracked down the middle, light spilling from within. Not flame, not gold. A dull, living red like blood, seen through flesh. Varro approached, slow, cautious. The air thickened. Each breath was like drinking from water too deep. He reached out his hand, and the whispers began. 1,000 voices at once. Not loud, not even words. At first, just the rhythm of thought, the collective murmur of memory. Then, clearer. Commander, Varro, we remember. He stepped back. The torch flared. In its light, the walls shifted, the carvings of names reshaped themselves into faces. Every soldier of the 13th stared back at him, eyes open, waiting. You were given to Rome, he said softly. You died for her. No, the voices whispered. We live as her. He drew his sword, holding it before him. If you are Rome, then what am I? Silence. Then, a sound like laughter, dry, distant, echoing through the stone. You are memory's shadow. You guard what no longer lives. He lowered the blade. His reflection shimmered in the black altar, and in it he saw himself wearing armor not his own. 13th insignia, a face pale with dust, eyes burning faintly red. He fell to his knees. The ground pulsed beneath him. The altar's crack widened, light spilling outward until it filled the chamber. In that light, he saw them, the 13th Legion, standing in formation around him, spectral and solid, faces expressionless. Their armor gleamed like obsidian. Their spears were shadows. The centurion stepped forward. Varro knew his face. He had seen it carved upon the walls above, centuries old. Why return? Varro asked. Because we were never gone, the centurion replied. Rome built itself on us. Every triumph, every feast, every empire's dawn, all stood on the bones beneath your feet. Then what do you want? The centurion smiled. Remembrance. Always remembrance. The walls trembled. Dust fell like snow. The voices rose again, chanting as one. Roma recorda. Rome remembers. The altar split completely. The light surged upward, a column reaching through the earth, through the stones, into the heart of the city above. Varro shielded his eyes. He saw images within it, the emperor's hollow face, the senators kneeling, the temples burning, and beneath it all, the river turning to gold. He reached into the light. It burned without heat, without pain, only memory. He saw himself at every battle, every oath, every moment he had sworn to protect Rome. And in the end, he saw her. Rome, not as city or empire, but as a living shape of countless faces, countless voices. A single, breathing memory, endless and hungry. When he emerged from the catacombs, the sky was pale and colorless. The streets were empty. Smoke hung like mist, and from the forum came the faint sound of stone cracking, as if the city were stretching, waking. Varro looked toward the Palatine. The palace loomed still, quiet, but he could feel it now, a pulse, faint but steady, beating beneath the marble. He whispered, Rome lives. And the wind answered, Rome remembers. The dead are patient. Empires are not built for eternity, but memory is. When the river remembers its dead, the city must drown in memory. Dawn came slow. The air was thick, metallic, humming like a wound that would not close. From the 7 hills, Rome looked almost peaceful, but the light that fell upon its rooftops had turned the color of rust. Pigeons circled the forum in silence. The markets did not open. The fountains had stopped running. And then, someone saw it. The Tiber wide, eternal, was no longer green. It glowed a dark, pulsing red, thick as blood, rolling like veins beneath a body. The people gathered along the embankments in disbelief. Children dipped their fingers in the water and screamed because it was warm. The priests came next, their robes damp with morning dew, their faces pale. They chanted to the river, to cleanse, to bless, to forgive, but every word they spoke was swallowed, as if the river listened and refused. By noon, the stench had spread, not rot, not death, something older, copper, incense, oil, and something sweet. The air tasted of sacrifice. From the aqueducts, the same water flowed into the city's fountains. They spilled red across marble. The pools at the temples ran crimson. Even the rain gutters gurgled like open veins. The people panicked. Some fled toward the hills. Others dropped to their knees and prayed not to gods, but to Rome itself, because they remembered the old tales that the Tiber was not just a river, but a body, a vein of the empire that carried the blood of all who had died for it. Now it had woken. At the Palatine, Varro stood alone on the balcony. The sun bled across the horizon. Below him, the river coiled like a living serpent through the streets. He had not slept since the descent. The visions haunted him, the altar, the soldiers, the living memory of Rome whispering beneath his skin. He touched his arm. The veins glowed faintly red beneath the flesh. He turned to the empty hall behind him. "You've begun," he said softly. From the shadows, the emperor's voice replied, "Rome endures." Night fell early. The torches burned with blue flame. In the Suburra district, the first bodies began to move. They were not corpses, not fully. Men and women who had drowned in the river now walked its banks, their eyes glowing faintly like lanterns underwater. They moved with purpose, faces calm, mouths whispering in the same rhythm. Roma Recorda. The living watched from windows, frozen, afraid to breathe. Those who stepped into the open were greeted gently, a hand on the shoulder, a whisper in the ear, and then they too joined the procession. By midnight, the city was full of them. Varro descended once more into the streets. The moon hung huge and low, mirrored red in the river's skin. He passed the temples, where statues now bled from their eyes, and fires burned with no smoke. He reached the steps of the Forum. There, the ghosts of senators stood in silent debate, their words unheard, their gestures frozen in endless argument. He moved through them, their forms flickering like reflections on glass. At the center, the altar from beneath the city now stood above ground black stone, cracking the marble beneath it, the red light pulsing stronger with every heartbeat. He approached, sword drawn, though he knew it was useless. "What are you doing to them?" he demanded. "They've served. They've bled. Let them rest." The wind answered in 1,000 voices. "They rest in remembrance." This isn't remembrance, it's ruin. Ruin is what memory becomes when it refuses to die. The ground trembled. The river roared. The arches of the aqueduct shuddered and burst, sending torrents of red cascading down the hills. In the flood, the ghosts did not drown. They stood firm, watching him with eyes that reflected every empire, every life, every sin. "Varro," they whispered, "you are our last." He fell to his knees. "Then end it. Let Rome sleep." "Rome does not sleep," the emperor's voice said behind him. "Rome dreams, and dreams are eternal." Lightning struck the Capitoline. The temples caught flame, but the fire burned inward, collapsing marble into itself until only ash remained. The city was reshaping the ancient and the new, merging into one impossible vision of itself, a Rome that existed in all times at once. Varro looked up, eyes wide with horror and awe. Through the smoke, he saw faces. In the sky, soldiers, emperors, slaves, lovers, all the ghosts of Rome, circling like constellations. They were beautiful and monstrous. The wind carried their song, Roma Aeternum, Roma Sanguinum, Roma Recorda, Rome Eternal, Rome the Blood, Rome Remembers. By dawn, the river had settled. The water ran clear again, but the city was changed. Where once stood marble, now bone. Where once stood temples, now stone veined with red. The people wandered like survivors of a dream they could not wake from. And Varro stood upon the bridge, watching the reflection of the city in the calm river below. In the water, Rome still bled. The blood of the empire runs not in veins but in memory, and memory never dies. A city cannot die while it remembers its name. The morning after the river cleared, Rome was quiet, not peaceful, but listening. The smoke had settled, and the air no longer smelled of blood, but of dust, marble, and rain. Those who survived whispered that it was over, that the curse had passed like a fever. But Varro knew better. He stood at the edge of the forum, where the altar had been the night before. It was gone now, or rather, it had moved. The marble tiles were cracked, fused into new shapes, as if the city had shifted in its sleep. He bent down, pressed his palm to the stone, and it whispered, "Varro." He pulled his hand back, startled, but the voice did not fade. It spoke softly, from beneath the surface, from within the walls, as if the city itself were drawing breath through its foundations. "We remember you." "Who?" Varro asked, though the streets were empty. "All who built, all who bled, all who prayed for Rome to never fall." The voice had no accent, no tone. It was countless voices, speaking as one, the echo of generations compressed into a single murmur. "You are our hand," it said, "our will." Varro shook his head. "No, I've seen what you've done. I won't be your soldier. You already are." He turned sharply, and for the first time, he realized the statues around him had changed. The gods looked different. Their eyes were deeper, their marble cracked like skin that had learned to age. The statue of Mars no longer held a spear, but a sword carved in the likeness of his own. And at the base of every plinth, new inscriptions glimmered in faint red lines, not Latin, not any script men had made, but he could read them all the same. They said, "Memory endures through flesh." He walked deeper into the city, past the temples, past the silent markets. The sound of his sandals echoed too far, carried not through air, but through bone. He stopped by a wall and pressed his ear to it. Beneath the stone, he heard whispers, conversations, laughs, cries, the sounds of an entire city alive beneath the marble. Not ghosts, but memories, replaying themselves endlessly. Children calling for bread, merchants arguing over coin, soldiers swearing allegiance, a mother humming to a newborn, all voices long dead, still circling in the veins of Rome. "You've trapped them," Varro whispered. "We have preserved them," the stone replied. "Forgetfulness is death. Memory is Rome." He walked until night fell, and in the fading light he began to see movement that wasn't movement. Walls breathing, arches flexing like ribs, columns rising a fraction higher as if inhaling. At every corner, the city rearranged itself slightly, not to frighten him, but to guide him. And at last, he found himself standing before the old temple of Janus, the god of doors and thresholds. Its great bronze gates were sealed shut. Varro stared at them, realizing they were no longer metal at all, but living flesh of stone, pulsing faintly with red light. He spoke softly. "Janus, gatekeeper, show me what you guard." The city answered, not in sound, but in vibration, the air trembling with memory. "We guard Rome from forgetting itself. Every empire dies when it forgets what it was." "And what are you now?" Varro asked. "We are what remains when history refuses to end." The doors opened slowly. Beyond them, darkness, endless and waiting. He stepped inside. The air was colder than death. The torches along the walls lit on their own, revealing carvings that spiraled across the chamber like veins. They showed every age of Rome at once, the rise of kings, the birth of the Republic, the empire's golden days, and the slow corruption of its soul. At the center stood a mirror tall, black, flawless. Varro approached it. In its surface, he did not see his reflection. He saw Rome, alive, endless, a million faces pressed together, whispering his name. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because you are the last who remembers truly," the voices said. "When the living forget, memory must take a body. When the world turns away, we must turn inward." "You're dying," Varro said. "We are becoming." He drew his sword. Its reflection glowed red in the mirror. "If I destroy this, will it end?" "No," the city whispered, "but it will silence the dream." He hesitated. Then, in a single motion, he drove the blade into the glass. The mirror shattered without a sound. The pieces fell in slow motion, each shard reflecting a different Rome, past, present, future, all breaking apart at once. The floor shook. The torches went out. And for a moment, he heard the city sigh, as if in pain or in peace. When he stepped back into the streets, the night was still. The voices were silent. The statues no longer moved. The air smelled of rain. Rome slept again. But Varro knew it was not over. The stones no longer whispered, but he could feel their gaze, the patience of something ancient, something waiting for the next name to carve into memory. He looked toward the horizon. The first light of dawn broke over the city, painting it gold again. And beneath that light, he heard one last whisper, barely audible. "Remember, when a city learns to speak, it never truly stops. It simply waits for the next man willing to listen. When the gods stop speaking, men invent silence to worship instead." The dawn came cold. The sky above Rome was the color of old parchment, and the wind carried the smell of rain and ash. The city did not stir. Its people moved quietly, like mourners who had forgotten the name of the dead they followed. The statues no longer whispered. The river ran clear again. But the silence felt wrong, too complete, too deliberate. Varro walked alone through the ruins of the Temple of Vesta, where the sacred fire had once burned for 1,000 years. Now it was gone. Only a faint heat shimmered in the stones. There, among the broken columns, he found them the last augurs of Rome. 3 old men and 1 woman, their white robes gray with dust, their faces lined with smoke and time. They were drawing symbols on the floor, chalk and ash in circular patterns, half prayer, half map. Each motion was slow, deliberate, weary. Varro knelt beside them. "You mean to cleanse it," he said softly. The eldest priest nodded. His hands shook as he worked. "If it can still be cleansed, the gods have been silent too long. Perhaps they've forgotten us." The priest looked up. His eyes were pale, almost blind. "No, Commander. It is we who forgot how to listen." They finished the circle as the sun rose higher, chalk glowing faintly, lines bending like veins toward the center. The woman, her name was Sabina, once keeper of the sacred fire, stepped forward and set a small flame at the circle's heart. It burned without smoke. "This is not to banish," she said. "It is to ask if Rome still remembers mercy." They began to chant low, ancient, the language older than the Republic, older even than the Republic. Myths. The air thickened, the sunlight dimmed, and in the distance, the bells of every temple long rusted and forgotten began to ring, one by one, slow, uncertain, but together. The sound filled the ruins, echoing through the empty streets, until it became a single tone, a heartbeat drawn from the city itself. Varro bowed his head. He felt it too, the pulse beneath the marble, the steady rhythm of something vast awakening. Sabina's voice trembled. "We offer what we have left, memory, devotion, and fear. Take them and give us silence." The flame flickered, then steadied. From it, a voice rose soft, distant, and layered with countless echoes. "You have nothing left to offer. We are already fed." The priests froze. Varro lifted his gaze. The flame had grown taller, its color shifting from gold to red. Within it, faint figures moved, not gods, but faces of Rome's past. Emperors, slaves, soldiers, lovers, all bound by light and memory, all speaking through one mouth. Rome remembers all. Every offering, every betrayal, every name carved into stone. We do not forget. We cannot. Sabina stepped closer, tears streaking her face. "Then tell us, what do you want from us?" "Nothing." The voice was calm, almost kind. "You wanted eternity. We gave it to you." The wind surged through the temple, scattering ashes. The flame began to consume itself, curling inward, folding light into shadow. The youngest priest fell to his knees. "Have we angered you?" "You worshipped memory," the voice said. "Now you live inside it." The circle flared, bright enough to blind. When the light faded, the flame was gone, and with it, the priests. Only ashes remained, perfectly still, shaped like 4 figures kneeling in prayer. Varro stood alone again. The bells had gone silent. The city was still. He looked toward the heavens, but the sky offered no answer. Only the faint reflection of the city's own light, a halo of red where the sun should be. He whispered, "Is that your mercy?" The wind answered in a single word, faint as breath on glass. "Remember." That night, Varro lit a torch and placed it where the flame had been. He bowed his head and whispered the old prayer, not to the gods, but to Rome itself. "Be still, sleep, forget." But the city did not sleep. The torch flickered, and for a moment, The shadows along the wall shifted, 4 figures bowing again in endless prayer. Faith is not believing the gods exist. It is accepting that they remember you even when you beg them to forget. Rome does not die. It rehearses death, century after century, until it becomes divine. Night fell like a curtain of smoke. The torches along the forum burned low, their light barely touching the statues that watched over the ruins. Varro walked through the heart of the silent city, his armor tarnished, his sword bound in cloth. He was the last commander of the 13th Legion, and tonight he was coming home. The streets were empty, yet he could feel eyes on him, not from windows or shadows, but from the stones themselves. Every slab of marble, every pillar and arch carried the memory of footsteps, of blood, of vows sworn and broken beneath the same sky. He passed the Senate steps, where the marble was blackened from the last fire. The doors stood open. Inside, the floor was covered in dust, but the seats were filled. Figures sat there in perfect stillness, wrapped in cloaks of shadow, their faces lost to the dark. Varro stopped at the center. "I have come," he said softly, "to surrender what remains." The silence broke. A voice answered, deep and resonant, like stone cracking beneath the earth. "You cannot surrender what was never yours." From the benches, the figures began to rise. Their movements were soundless, their outlines fading in and out of sight. One stepped forward, a man in the armor of a Roman general, his face a mirror of Varro's own. "Do you know me?" the double asked. Varro's throat tightened. "You are the past." The echo smiled faintly. "I am the record. The Legion remembers." And then Varro heard it, the distant sound of marching. At first, soft, like wind over stone. Then louder, heavier, rhythmic. Thousands of footsteps echoing from beneath the city. From the catacombs, from the riverbeds, from every buried street where bones had slept for centuries. The ground trembled. In the darkness beyond the Senate, figures began to emerge, rank upon rank of soldiers in faded red. Helmets cracked, armor corroded, yet their formation perfect. The 13th Legion had returned. They halted before Varro. Their eyes glowed faintly, not with fire, but with memory. "We were promised eternity," one of them whispered, "and you delivered it." "No," Varro said. "I only survived it." "You carried our names," the echo said, "and in doing so, you kept us awake." The soldiers lifted their spears. The sound rang out like the closing of a gate. "The city remembers us," they said together, "but it remembers through you." Varro looked up at the shadowed dome above, then let it end. Let it finally end. The echo, the ghost of himself, stepped closer. "You can end your life," it said, "but not your memory. Rome keeps what it loves. And Rome loved you." Varro's hand trembled as he drew his sword. The steel was blackened with age. He drove it into the floor of the Senate, the sound echoing through the chamber like thunder. The ground split. Light erupted from the crack, not golden, not red, but white, cold, and pure as forgetting. The soldiers began to fade. Their outlines dissolved like dust in water. The echo smiled again, not in victory, but in release. "Sleep, Commander," it said. "We will stand watch." The city exhaled. A long, slow breath that carried through every street, every temple, every ruin. When the light dimmed, Varro stood alone. His sword lay beside him. The blade turned to ash. He looked out through the open doors of the Senate. The stars were visible, now clear and sharp above the ruins. For the first time in centuries, Rome was silent, truly silent. He descended the steps slowly, his shadow long across the marble. The wind carried no whispers, now only the faint scent of rain and stone. At the edge of the forum, he stopped. There, carved into the ground, was an inscription he did not remember writing. Roma meminit Rome remembers. He touched the letters, and for a moment, he felt warmth beneath his fingers, like the heartbeat of something vast, finally resting. He smiled. "Then let it remember," he whispered, "without me." He walked into the dawn. The sun rose behind him, and the light turned the ruins to gold. As it did, the last shadow of the 13th Legion faded from the stones, and Rome, for the first time in its long, haunted life, was at peace. Eternity does not end. It only stops needing to be remembered.